Welcome to AI for Good, the leading, action-oriented, global and inclusive United Nations platform on AI. Organized by the International Telecommunication Union, the United Nations Agency for Digital Technologies, in partnership with 50+ UN sister organizations and co-convened with Switzerland. The goal of AI for Good is to unlock AI's potential to serve humanity. In today's AI for Good event, we are counting on you to use the live video wall feature to ask questions and post comments to help create an engaging discussion. We encourage you to stay until the end to chat, connect, ask questions, and network with our distinguished facilitators and world-class AI experts in the neural network. It is now time to kick off the session and welcome our first speaker. The floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining the ITU AI for Good Biodiversity series. I'm Dave Thau, WWF's Global Data and Technology Lead Scientist, and I'll be your host for today's session. According to a 2020 World Economic Forum PricewaterhouseCoopers study, over half the world's total gross domestic product is moderately or highly dependent on nature and its services, and as a result, exposed to risks from nature loss. At the same time, according to a 2023 United Nations Environmental Program report, private finance is spending $5 trillion per year on activities that directly harm nature, almost half of which comes from construction, real estate, food, oil and gas, and electric utilities. That's about 5% of the global GDP. Public disclosures on the impacts of corporate activities on nature and the impacts of nature on corporate activities are seen as one way to help the private sector reduce risks, both risks to nature and risks from nature. But how do we know if those disclosures are useful or actionable? That is one of the questions being asked by today's speaker, Dr. Aryo Saeed Vahefe and his colleagues. Dr. Vahefe is an academic associate at the University of Zurich, Department of Geography, and deputy director of the Sustainable and Resilient Economy AI Lab Surreal at the University of Zurich. He's an AI and climate consultant for the World Meteorological Association and holds a PhD in water resources management from Tehran Polytechnic, carried out in collaboration with the Swiss Federal Institute of Aquatic Science and Technology and the Texas A&M University in the USA. His research focuses on the intersection of machine learning, natural language processing, and climate science, developing AI-driven tools that strengthen climate services and decision-making. At the University of Zurich, he leads the university's contribution to an NCCS impacts project, assessing climate change impacts on multiple sectors under adaptation and non-adaptation scenarios. And in 2024, he received the Royal Meteorological Society Innovation Award for his role in developing AskWMO, an AI-powered climate knowledge assistant. Dr. Hefe, it's a great privilege to have you with us today. Please tell us about your work.
Thank you very much for the nice introduction. Hello, everyone. I can quickly share my screen and jump to the presentation. So, good evening, everyone. Good afternoon. Good morning. Today, I will present our work on using AI to assess the decision usefulness of corporate nature-related disclosure. This is a project funded by Swiss National Science Foundation. In today's world, we are facing an unprecedented nature crisis. Natural capital per person has declined by nearly 40% between 1992 and 2014. Extinction rates are estimated at 100 to 1,000 times the baseline average over the past tens of millions of years. Human activities, industrial process, agriculture, urbanization are all driving this rapid biodiversity loss. Yet corporate transparency on nature-related impacts remains insufficient, and stakeholders need this information for better decision-making. The Task Force for Nature-Related Financial Disclosures, in short TNFD, was launched in 2021 to address this transparency gap. TNFD adoption is entirely voluntary, and this creates a fundamental problem. Voluntary regimes enable what we call, which later I will introduce, cheap talk, a non-binding commitment, decisions to manage public perception rather than reflect substantive action. This undermines both accountability and usefulness of disclosures. In our study, we address four, in today's presentation, which is based on the study on the right, you can see. We address four key questions. First, are the corporate disclosure actually aligned with the TNFD recommendations and regulations? And the second, what sentiment do companies report? Is it positive or negative impacts? Third, where are the disclosed activities located geographically? And fourth, are the commitments of the companies make legally enforceable or just statements?
Ario, I'm not sure if your slides are being presented. I'm not seeing them. Could you try to present them again?
Okay. So, do you see my screen?
Yes, now I see it. Okay, now I see it.
Oh, sorry.
There you go. Thank you.
Okay, so I quickly passed the slides now, the ones that I already mentioned. And now referring to this, sorry for this interruption that happened. And so our study addressed basically four key questions. First, are the corporate disclosures actually aligned with TNFD recommendation? Second, what sentiment do companies report, positive or negative impacts? And third, where are these disclosed activities located geographically? And last but not the least, are the commitment of the companies make them enforceable legally or just the statements? And here we can see for the later read, you can also check this in the published paper. Our key contributions are actually that we first develop and introduce AskNature.ai, a novel publicly available AI tool now called ChatTNFD.app for systematic analysis of nature-related disclosures. Second, we provide the first medium-scale assessment of nature action 100 companies, alignment with TNFD regulations. And finally, by analyzing sentiment and geographic focus on the enforceability, we provide empirical evidence of cheap talk patterns and highlights the urgent need for legally binding regulations. AskNature is built on Retrieval Augmented Generation or RAG architecture. RAG system answer question based on a retrieve content rather than the model's parametric knowledge, which significantly reduce hallucination risk. The tool vectorizes corporate sustainability report, stores embedding in a database, then retrieves relevant paragraphs to answer the TNFD aligned questions. It is designed to be publicly available for researchers, investors, and regulators. Here's how the pipeline works. We take two input, TNFD recommendation and corporate sustainability reports. Documents are split into chunks, encoded into vectors, and stored in a database. At a query time, we retrieve the top 6 most similar chunks. Our prompting system incorporates expert feedback to guide reasoning for the model, for the language model. Then the LLM generate the answer, which are then stored scored against the TNFD alignment. And finally, we provide a sentiment analysis and geographic extraction. The TNFD framework is structured around four pillars. Governance covers board oversight and management roles. Strategy, which addresses effect of business models and financial planning. And we have risk and impact management involve processes to identify and prioritize nature-related issues. Metrics and targets is the last, which focus on the quantitative measurement and goal setting of companies. In total, there are 14 questions across these pillars that organizations should address in the reporting system. And here is a screenshot to the TNFD guideline. In our study, to enable more granular analysis, we developed a tree of questions methodology. This starts with the 14 main TNFD questions, and then we have a tree on governance, 4 on strategy, 4 on risk management, and 3 on metrics. Then we iteratively generate follow-up questions at each level with 5 levels of depth. Each TNFD question then spans to 121 sub-questions, giving us a total of 1,694 total questions. For example, TNFD question 1 asks about board oversight. The first follow-up asks how the board integrates nature consideration into strategic decisions. Then the second level asks what specific criteria are planning guidelines. Then we have how those criteria are developed, and finally, what inputs inform and development processes. This hierarchical structure ensures we capture disclosure quality and generate questions that are meaningful. In total, the AskNature includes 4 analytical modules designed to assess this disclosure quality from multiple angles. First, we look at impact direction, classifies every nature-related statement as either C to N, company affecting nature, or N to C, nature affecting company. This follows the double materiality principle now embedded in the framework like CSRD. About 50-20% of the analysis that we did on Nature 100 disclosure are actually CN2, basically, and 45% are N2C. And then we have sentiment analysis, which scores each disclosure from -10 to +10. For instance, for CN2, a negative means harmful to nature, and positive means an opportunity. Then we adapt the rating guidelines from regulations, work on climate-related chip talk, which we publish in 2025 at the lab. So based on that, we then qualifies how cheap is a statement, the level of the chip talk. And then we have a geographic analysis. We extract country mentions from each paragraph and pages and link them to the paragraph sentiment scores. We then overlay these locations with maps of critical natural assets, providing 90% of the nature contribution to the people. And then finally, we have chip talk assessment, scores from 0 to 10. This specifically look at the enforceability of the disclosures. So each uses a scale with the explicit criteria, and this allows us to distinguish substantive disclosure from just statements that sounds good, but carries no accountability. We applied the AskNature methodology to 91 companies of the Nature 100, which investor engaging from the firms to have a significant potential and negative and the positive to the nature. So these companies span 8 sectors, from biotechnology, chemicals, consumers goods, food production, retail, forestry, and packing and mining. We analyzed their corporate sustainability reports from 2020 to 2023. And the samples was chosen because these firms are considered systematically important for nature loss. Now let's look at our results. So our first analysis or alignment shows that a clear pattern. So the governance and strategy pillar score relatively high. That means like the disclosures are actually providing good information on that. These involve qualitative narrative disclosures that companies can articulate, for instance, using existing framework. However, as you can see, risk and impact management and specifically metric and targets show a weaker performance, with the scores often falling below 6 out of 10, which shows and confirms that what we call talk versus walk, meaning that companies more state rather than actually provide some meaningful indices and outcomes. Now let's look at our geographic analysis and what we did with our sentiment analysis, followed by double materiality framework. For CN to N, we found how many companies affect the nature. We score from -10 for a very harmful impact to the nature and +10 for highly beneficial. For nature to companies, we also look at how companies benefit from the nature. We score from -10 again to severe risk to +10 for major opportunities. The process works as follows. We first check if each paragraph discusses climate or nature topics, for instance, emission, biodiversity, etc. And then for the paragraphs, the LLM assigns CN2 and N2C scores with explanation with the paragraph mention multiple effects. And as you can see, the results reveals that approximately 72% of C to N disclosure reports, they have a positive sentiment, and companies claiming beneficial impacts on nature. And only 13% acknowledge harmful impact. This is deeply questionable, and because we are in the middle of a biodiversity crisis, and according to these companies reporting, then the world should be a very perfect, which unfortunately is not at the moment with respect to the biodiversity loss. Also, we can see that N2C sentiment is more balanced. So we have a 30% negative and 42% positive. And companies are more willing to report risk that nature poses to their operations than acknowledging harm that they cause to the nature. So our also analysis show that about the countries that are very impactful. So as you can see, the United States and China are most frequently mentioned in the reporting. And it's not surprising that given the headquarters, locations, and supply chain of the companies mainly are in the US and also coming from China. And you can see also we have Australia and Brazil appear to be frequently. However, what is very surprising is that African nations are barely mentioned, despite their very huge natural resources and environmental importance. And that means that perhaps some of the activities that are being done there are not being disclosed enough. And we have also Central Asia and parts of the South Asia that are basically a little bit underrepresented, which then it raises questions about the supply chain transparency. When we overlay the disclosed location with maps of critical natural asset regions providing 90% of nature's contribution to the people, we find a minimal overlap. Basically, companies classify as systematically important in reversing nature loss, disclose little or no activity in this critical region. This could mean that they have no operations there, but that contradicts with ongoing biodiversity decline, which is more likely that activities in this area through the supply chain are barely disclosed. Now we have our Cheap Talk assessment, which evaluates the disclosure, how qualified or how is the quality of this disclosure across the 3 dimensions, which is each is scored from 0 to 10. So we have first the commitment. So the commitment measures whether companies make explicit statement with defined actions. A score 10 actually meaning that, for instance, reducing emission by 50% by 23, or a score 2 can be a vague statement like we will invest or we aim for more sustainable solutions. Specifically, these are like very important to assess the commitment. And then we have the specificity, which assess whether a commitment connect to the actual operation. And high scores require detail like investment amounts, timeline, and implementation mechanism. And low scores reflect basically a generic statement. And then we have the final one, which is enforceability. It is critical dimension, and we ask what happens if the company fails to deliver. The score of 10 requires legally binding commitments with a third-party verification and financial penalties, and a score 0 means purely statement with zero accountability. So as you can see, our results show commitment averages around 6. Companies do make a statement, for sure, and specificity is lower and highly varied. So many lack accountability plans, but enforceability average only 3 to 3.7 out of 10. This is the heart of this is basically the main core and the foundation of the chip talk phrase, which means that commitments that are binding with enforceability are less, and there's no consequences if the commitment don't carry out. So if I want to summarize the key finding of this research, I would say that first, the TNFD alignment does not equal substance. So companies can trick and can tick boxes without meaningful action. So second, we have positive statement contradicts observed by biodiversity loss. A lot of positive statements you can see in the CSR, corporate sustainability reports, while we see like day by day news about the biodiversity loss and extinction. And last, we have a geographically critical regions for nature that are not presented enough. And finally, we see that we don't have a legal enforcement of the TNFD or other regulations. So that means like the current corporate sustainability disclosures, although technically are TNFD aligned, are not sufficiently decision useful for the stakeholders or for those who want to make decision for the companies on the company's profile. So we have a few recommendations also for the policy side. So based on our funding, we want to say that for policy or 4 pillars would be good to consider. And first, establish a legally binding regulatory framework for disclosures, voluntary regimes like TNFD that basically enable the chip talk. And second, extended disclosure requirements to cover entire supply chain, similar to the EU's corporate sustainability directive. And third, we suggest to develop a robust monitoring system to track whether disclosure activities is actually improving system health or not. And last but not the least, integrate empirical verification, such as remote sensing data or Earth observation or on-ground truths to basically clarify corporate claims. And to conclude, I would say that AskNature provides a scalable AI-powered approach to analyze corporate nature-related disclosures. Our analysis of Nature 100 companies reveals that current CSRs are not decision useful. They are characterized by positive bias, geographic blind spots, and unenforceable commitments. We need a binding regulation for the supply chain coverage as well. So, and we look forward for any collaboration in the future, and we plan to integrate this text-based analysis with the satellite data in our future works and studies to verify how corporate claims basically against the real environmental outcomes. And with that being said, I would like to thank you. And you can basically also visit our website, surreal.ai. So we have different projects and we are open for any collaboration in this domain. And with that being said, I would like to thank you. And I would be happy to also take questions.
All right. Great. Thank you very much for that presentation and for the work um, that you're doing. It's a very interesting application of large language models. Um, I have a few questions for you, and also anyone in the stream. I'll ask yours as well. Um, I have a couple of questions for you, and like I just want to start with a general one, which is around how TNFD is being um, like rolled out, or like your work was on the corporate sustainability reports, but they weren't necessarily written to follow TNFD. Like, can you say a little bit about where TNFD is and whether there are companies reporting against it? Like, what's the status of it?
Oh, that's a very good question. As far as I know, in COP, like last COP, I think it was. I think TNFD was presenting some of the corporate sustainability reports that are actually aligned and adopted the TNFD. I believe there are like below there are about like 400 companies maximum that so far have adopted TNFD. Again, this is voluntary. Perhaps I would say from my perspective and from my analysis of the Nature 100, I could say that mainly companies started with the TCFD, Task Force for Climate Disclosure, Financial Climate Disclosures, and then they also adopted the TNFD to in the coming years. And I guess in 2023 and 2024, we see that more companies are actually incorporating the regulations into the CSR. So if I do a reanalysis of the 2024 and 2025 CSR, I would definitely see a different pattern, perhaps, and perhaps you could see like a little bit of the like improvement in the scores of the TNFD, in particular because I guess it's now the business analysts in the companies, they have also read all the regulations. They're more material compared to 2 years back. So I would say in 2024 we see this jump, but I would say we have still like about 400 companies that are disclosing and they are adopting this. But these are like some numbers based on our research. So for sure, this is not like the actual, or this is not the view of TNFD. This is just from the research side that we are monitoring and we are looking at the CSRs.
Hmm. Yeah. It'll be interesting to see if the like documents that are actually going reporting to the TNFD questions if you get different results.
Yeah.
Um, and then are you in touch with the TNFD people? Like have you shared this with them and what
Well,
did they yeah.
yeah, we have been in contact with Tony and team, and we have had like many sessions with the colleagues at TNFT, and so I think they're doing very good job. So they are providing like a very nice framework. From the research perspective, the more companies providing the CSRs, it's good for us. We have more material to analyze and deep dive to that. However, as mentioned in the results, we have a gap here, which is about the enforcement or binding enforceability. That means like this is still voluntary. So, and with the current basically atmosphere around climate and nature, I wouldn't see that in coming years there would be like a binding enforcement. I mean, I know EU is doing a great job in terms of like providing some enforceability as well, but I guess beyond the EU, it's I would see we should be a bit less optimistic compared to a few years back that we will have like some binding regulatories as well.
No, it's not moving in the right direction.
Yeah.
Um, so you mentioned the TCFD. Have you done a similar analysis with that? Would it make sense?
Indeed, we well in 2 years back, which is in the AI era, is like a long time ago. We did this analysis for the for TCFD. So TCFD, I think now, it's now adopted or basically merged with. So it's not TCFD anymore, if I'm not wrong. I think it's. I should double check the abbreviations. But yes, we did the analysis and we have another tool in our platform. It's called Ask Climate. So Ask Climate or previously Chat Report is basically a similar tool with a few less features that goes to corporate sustainability report with respect to the climate financial disclosures.
Okay.
Yeah, we do have.
Oh, yeah, interesting. Do you get the similar? I mean, you might.
No, we didn't implement this tree of questions and like
Yeah.
analysis to extent that we did for the nature. We stop at the stage of providing the tool and presenting this into the computer science conferences. I think the paper, if I'm not wrong, was accepted for EMNLP 2023. Yeah. Uh, so mainly was basically the pipeline that how a language model can be a helpful asset for a business analyst. So instead of a business analyst going through a CSRs for about like a day or maybe a couple of hours, so within a minutes you can go through this and see if the corporate reports provide information according to the regulation. So that was mainly the pipeline. So this work was more in-depth analysis with the nature that we published recently.
Okay. Interesting. So I have a couple of like technical questions about the work you presented. So one is so you have your ratings, that you are giving different reports according to the questions, and those are like quantified numbers, right? Those are where where are those numbers coming from? Like, how are you attaching the different values to the addressing the questions? Like, I guess it's you have instruction sets giving examples of that, right? But can you talk a little bit more about that part of the work?
Exactly. So this is basically in context learning. So we provided a few shots and a few examples of different categories and different scoring, which were annotated by experts, a group of experts here. Collectively, we look at a few basically paragraphs that are very useful for examples to be given to the model as a few shots. And then we provided this also within context learning. And then we provided this information to the language model and use them to then use this in learning and be able to basically further score the unseen documents.
Okay, interesting.
A
So,
good improvement, like for the future, would be to annotate more a larger data set and provide a data set, which I know a few colleagues here are working on that. Although the paper is not yet published, but I think they aim to a very recent upcoming computer science that they are providing the benchmark and for the corporate sustainability report alignment with different regulations, including the TNFD. So that means like going through many paragraphs of different reports and extract those information using the expert knowledge of the group of three and annotate some scores and using those information to better fine tune a model that can also use those information to better give the score. Yeah, I know this is going, but it was not part of this work, but it's an ongoing work.
okay, yeah, that's terrific. That will be very, very valuable. And I was going to ask, like, how long? Oh, well, I guess the first question is like, at what level, when your experts came up with the instruction set, it wasn't for all like 1,600 questions, was it?
No. It's basically just the main 14 question. that a business analyst would do at any firm. So we have an instruction for the first 14 question and the next three, basically two depths, which each has a three in-depth question. And then we use this for only the two layers of the analysis. And then again, we have like more granular analysis with the level 4 and 5. But the annotated data only comes from which is an ongoing work, I know, for the first two layers.
Okay. Yeah. It occurred to me that it would take a huge effort to have instruction sets, even if it's just two or three questions for each of those. That would take a long time.
Exactly.
So on the tree and all at the bottom at the leaves of the tree, did you consult with experts on those questions as well?
You mean experts from the TNFD or in particular, or
The ones that you had working on the instruction set.
we here we like two of our colleagues, one also first author. She's still working with CEP and very involved in the TNFD and also nature and biodiversity laws. So to some extent, we made sure that the questions are like there are enough guardrails and enough basically instruction to the LLM to make the new layer of the questions. But it is also limited, and part of the limitation of the work that the experts, we have only few resources. However, there were like two colleagues that were basically taking care of this part. Yes.
Hmm. Okay. Nice. I guess then on the other side of it, the sort of the validation of the outputs of the models, do you have a sense for like if you were to compare a couple of companies um, and then ask an expert to analyze the results that you got out of your model, did you look for any alignment like that, or how'd you go in general about validating the outputs?
That's a very nice question. Unfortunately, no, we couldn't. We have the tool up and running in our system, so we know that, for instance, there are companies, then there are financial institute that they are to some extent using the tool. So we collect the reports that they are analyzing and the questions and the answers for sure, and also the follow-up questions because they can also ask like a follow-up questions. But we do not have a particular like a partnership with any of the companies or any financial institute to like double check this. We are very open. Like, for instance, we are working in another project with WWF Switzerland for ESRS regulations. There we have like a very close collaboration to basically develop this ESRS framework. The ESRS actually on that project, which is basically a step forward from this work to another framework, and also looks for the double materiality and other new innovations. There we have like more expert in the loop. This work was like the foundation. Also, we wanted to demonstrate how this can be useful. In this work we didn't use, but we have like an ongoing project with WWF Switzerland, and that's about developing the tool, which is actually in the final stages, and we are now finalizing that. Is for an AI tool for ESRS framework.
Okay. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see that. I guess um, getting to the part of your talk that was discussing the overlap of the countries, the geographies, and where impacts are being felt. Um, it seems like if the supply chains aren't being disclosed, then it would be pretty hard to validate that part of it. Um,
Exactly.
yeah. Have you but there are people who are doing this sort of supply chain tracking. Like I wonder if there are potential partnerships there. Um,
I know a few colleagues. They are mainly It's a tricky because I know like a few colleagues that they are doing this, but they are mainly startups. And so this is part of their value proposition. And our work is like basically open source. So it's always tricky to some extent because whatever we do, we at the end we put it like online, open source as well. While for the private sector, it's mainly part of the value proposition and the IP. So we haven't made a like a partnership on that side that we join force with the private sector, for instance. Then they have like their customers and we work with them. I know if there are at least a few in Zurich that I'm aware of. I've had many talks with them, but again, when it comes to this part of like a collaboration, it's hard because they are making revenue. For us, it's basically research. But it's
Hmm.
very, but we are very open. So if there are any, like even in the audience, if someone is very interested to do that, we are very open. For instance, we did another work with Influence Map. It's with their lobby map project. So the influence map basically look how lobbying of companies impact the policy. There we had a very, and it was funded by Climate Arc. There we had a very, like a close collaboration with Influence Map. They provided like all the framework that they're doing. So, and we built this automation tool for them. Their business analysts use that. In this particular TNFD, we didn't do that. Yeah.
Hmm. All
But we
right.
are open. If someone is very interested, and we are very open to share the codes if they need. And it's all on the MIT license, so even anyone without telling us can use it for any purposes.
Okay, that's great. Yeah. Yeah. I like the sort of the tree of questions approach. Is are there other examples of that being used in other applications? How standard is that?
I think it's very similar. The approach is very similar to the chain of thought in LLM because you can provide like instruction how, I mean, back to let's say a year ago, it was very, or maybe a year and a half ago, it was very top a hot topic for the research that how to make this chain of thought like pragmatic. And I know there are like many overlaps, and we got very inspiration from the chain of thought and how a language model can make reasonable reasoning and basically given a very complex query, how they can basically make a very structured reasoning step by step and finalize this. So we inspired by that, and we introduced this decision tree, chain of trees.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it's nice. Yeah, there's something I've been interested in a lot, which I think relates to your work, and maybe a good follow-up question is looking at past reports of conservation actions and trying to see the durability of those actions. So it's kind of like, can you look at a report like a CSR and figure out um, what the impacts are. Uh, so you talk about enforceability, and it's even in your recommendations to have more metrics. So I think another thing to look at is sort of monitorability.
Exactly.
So not just, is it enforceable? Are you aligned with third-party verifiers? But like how monitorable um, are the metrics that you're putting in your report? Like if you how do you think about that? Or does that
So
fit into
it's
your
a very interesting topic, and we're actually having an ongoing project called it's called Leo, large language for Earth observation.
Hmm.
So there we basically look at like we connect. it's very, now we have also Earth AI from Google, or we have also like many foundation models on the geospatial part, like a Terramine from IBM, also Alpha Earth from Google, that you can look at like the embeddings of the geospatial grids and geospatial locations through the similarity search. And so what we are working on that at the moment is a project called Leo, large language model for Earth observation. There we can basically ask questions directly from the satellites, and we have enough guardrails. For instance, someone can ask like, what is the water quality in Lake, I don't know, Michigan? And then the model will ask, okay, what is the timeline and what are the parameters that you are looking for? Is it chlorophyll? Is it, for instance, water index? And then it provides some basically geospatial information, including the teeth and other images, and also the answer to that question based on the satellite. So if the information from the supply chain and the whole process is valid, so we can, for instance, with all, you can monitor, for instance, a supply chain, let's say from the cement industry, and since we're in Switzerland, let's say Holcim, and they're doing a good job. And so you can see, like, for instance, how is the evolution of a nitrate, NO2, over the time in the factories that they have. And is it to some extent basically similar to what they are disclosing in the report or not? I think it's a very nice area, and it's part. I would love to see like more and more work to be done on that part. We have very limited resources here, but it's a very important direction that we're investing a lot on that. So to be able to basically verify these claims by looking at the real impact through the remote sensing and Earth observation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's a very exciting area that's being developed. I know there are, like I can think of some projects like the World Resources Institute has this Global Nature Watch, which gets to this question a little bit on in certain ways. And then there's a group, the Basque Center for Climate Change has the ARIES project, which is like you ask it a question in natural language and it leverages models and data sets and puts together a whole chain and does the analysis. And I think the UN is using that for their environmental assessment calculator. So I think there's a lot going on there. And thinking about Aries a little bit, like they use, I think, both the sort of neural net approach and I think also maybe some of the the symbolic approach too. Like, is any of your work go into like looking more at like knowledge graphs and that kind of thing to support the neural nets?
Um, we have colleagues here that working with the knowledge graph of a supply chain for a lint in the chocolate industry. So, but it's specific only for one particular project. So we don't have like a global approach because it's very data intensive in terms of like all the information related to the supply chain should be somehow disclosed, and then you can monitor, for instance, what happens if there is a disruption in this particular area, and how would this affect the performance of the companies in Zurich and their export, and then how this, for instance, nature to companies would then be calculated, and how is this basically comparable with the analysis that we do it without knowing this information. We have a very small project, but we don't have a very big one. So it's a very interesting topic and domain, and I know universities and also private sector, they're doing a lot on this side because it's very important also for companies. They have to provide this information and also do this physical risk. So it's very good for them also to have it through the supply chain. At least a few companies I know that they also work on that. I think with respect to the research side, I see. I think again, it's more on the data side because there are not at least to my knowledge, there are not many data sources that provide supply chain information for with not requesting you for a lot of investment to purchase this data. So it's a tricky part, this supply chain data. But if anyone has it and they want to do a joint project, we are happy to collaborate and discuss. It's a very important. I know the atmosphere globally at the moment is not in a right setup for nature and nature loss, but I think we should do something great, no matter what is going on.
Yeah. The supply chains are hard, especially when you're trying to get down to sort of act like geospatial information about, where things are
Assets are
set up
located,
or it's just the companies keep it private and
exactly.
but one solution is to create a tool for the companies to use themselves for their own risk analysis. I know, there are examples of that where, you're not putting it in the public, you're still having an impact by building a tool that can help reduce environmental risks. So that's one angle people have taken for that, but otherwise it's very, very hard. Let's see, I just have just a few more questions for you. Thank you so much
Thank you. No, it's very
for your answers so
interesting
far.
and no, thank you so much. Please.
So one's kind of just a general question about the models that you use. Did you explore lots of different LLMs, or did you pretty much stick with one, or how did you go about that process?
Yeah, and this one because we didn't have any. Well, in this project, we just used the OpenAI model, GPT-4 and GPT 3.5, and then we also GPT Chat Turbo, I guess. So we didn't basically try different setup like Google Family Gemini models or Claude from Anthropic or DeepSeek or the on-premises like Kiven or from the Alibaba or the Meta. So in this project, we didn't do that. However, there is another paper of us, like the group, that we are working on the comparison of, for instance, different models, how different model performed in terms of like the reasoning, in terms of numerical reasoning.
Mm.
So in this work, we didn't work or compare different models. It's just the OpenAI model. We have a paper submitted to ACL, which then there we are looking, for instance, on the performance of the Gemini 2.5, a fine-tuned local model and agentic system versus OpenAI model. So there we have like different evaluation and also metrics, which mainly provides like how an extraction is the one that should be extracted according to the ground truth. In this work, unfortunately, we didn't have enough time and resources to do that, but I guess again, I think we provided a very good foundation. The codes are freely available on our GitHub, so anyone who is interested, they can use it, and they can also just basically change a little bit the codes and have their embedding of the Google and also the LLM of the Google or another model.
hmm Oh yeah, that part is interesting. The how do you evaluate the outputs of the different models? Like that is a whole other project, right? Yeah. Um, well, I think we've exhausted the questions and the from the listeners, and so I just have one more question for you, which is what's next? Where are you taking this? What do you think? Do you have ideas about how to build on it? And in particular, like, do you have ideas about your recommendations at the end? Do you think there's anything you can do to help support those? So I guess that's two questions.
So thank you. No, there are very interesting actually questions and basically reflecting the direction of our lab. So we are investing a lot on the Earth observation, and in particular, we are working in a project. I mentioned Leo. So the Leo basically is a large language model. I think even we will have a very small prototype ready. It's called Leo.Earth very soon. This will be for policymakers. Basically, they can ask their questions from the. So we will invest and we will collaborate a lot with colleagues from ETH and other universities on the Earth observation and how natural language processing, Earth observation, climate, and nature can like meet each other at some point and make a usefulness. So this is an ongoing project on the accountability and monitoring. We had a few interaction with the UN. In particular, I work as a consultant at WMO. So there, to some extent, we have two projects that I mean UN and nations are basically start with some compared to the industry and compared to the research, with some delay, start like embracing how generative AI can benefit them. And we also have a project called Digital Twin. Digital Twin is basically it encompasses all the tools that we have built so far. So we have the AskNature, which is for nature-related financial disclosure. We have Chat Report or Ask Climate, which is for climate financial disclosures alignment. And then we have the Lobby Map, the project that looks how companies' performance information on the website, reportings, annual report is basically impacts the regulations and lobbying. So we have like now then a pipeline which then will be released as a command CLI and also a GitHub repo. So people can, or let's say from industry or from a financial institute or from policy side, they can use it in their environmental setup. They can, like the way that they do programming, they can basically look at each company's scoring for AskNature over the time, and then Ask Climate over the time, and then lobbying over the time. So these would provide some good information specifically for asset managers, policymakers, and investors. However, we do not go to the binding session. I think that's the part that still is missing. And if someone is very interested, and I think this part still needs a lot of, I would say, I mean, they should provide as much as they can transparent information to make it publicly available. So at some point, decision makers and the policy side also decide to make it like actionable and put some effort to make some binding to that. So making sure that, okay, if the company reveals something and there is no evidence to that, either they should not reveal it, or if they reveal it, there should be like enough evidence to support that statement. This part is something that I think is beyond the capacity of the research group that we are having. And that's the part that we really hope that like institute like WWF or organizations like the UN organizations, they put some effort and make sure that this happens, for instance. I mean, because it also needs like public engagement with the public to make like some awareness campaigns to make sure that because if something is happening and the public does not accept that, or it's basically reflected in a sense that it doesn't make sense to then public, at least in Switzerland, they vote and they say they would reject that. So it's very tricky part, I would say.
Yeah. All right. Well, there's a lot that you already done, and which is amazing. And I definitely look forward to seeing what more comes out of your lab and talking more about possible collaborations. So
Thank you
thank
so
you.
much.
Um,
Thank
thanks
you,
very
David.
much for joining us and your work and your presentation.
Thank you so much for inviting.
Yes, and I also want to thank ITU for hosting this series. Thanks everybody for organizing it. We're going to close the session out. Thanks everybody for listening and for your questions. And I also want to thank my co-hosts for the series, Lily Shu and Sarah Beery, who've also been moderators for some of the speakers. And thank you again, Dr. Rahefi, for your presentation.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Have a good rest of the day.
Right. Bye-bye.
Bye.